it's important to understand if you love and care about somebody, if you've got to the stage where you admitted you need help and they need help, you want the best help you can get. I don't mind admitting I fell apart for a while. I had to take some time off. It's really hard sometimes to realise that the best help you can get is often independent of your family and friends.
You're listening to the Care Podcast, brought to you by Unique Senior Care. We're here to share honest, practical conversations to help you navigate the care journey, whether you're just starting out or you're already facing some tough decisions. In this episode, we're joined by Gary Strong, a paramedic educator and trainer, who's also arranged care for two of his family members. Gary is sharing a unique perspective backed by professional experience as well as the personal story of arranging care for his loved ones. Gary, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for inviting me along.
So Gary, can you tell me a bit about your professional experience and your role?
I'll try and keep it short, Joe, because I sort of fell into an ambulance service job in the late 1980s. Funny enough, taking older adults with dementia and all sorts of conditions to day centres initially, and then progressed onto emergency ambulances. Developed an interest in education quite early, and I won't go through all the moves I've done. I've been a bit nomadic in my career, but essentially I've worked in education in some way, shape or form for the last 20 odd years, teaching in an ambulance service, teaching in a university, and now working for a professional body which really is supporting others offering education. We offer continuing professional development. We offer a lot of support for the universities teaching paramedic practice. I sometimes say my job now is a little bit like the halftime sports commentators. I can talk a good game, but I don't play it as well as I used to. And I'm not being facetious to say that, because it's actually, it's important to understand how we got where we are in the profession and how to meet the professional needs of people who do this because they care. It's the same in your role, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And how do you feel your background in the paramedic service affected the way that you approach things with your family?
We always want to fix things, paramedics. That's what we're like. We always want to find a solution, whether that solution is a referral to a GP or a trip to a hospital or suturing a wound, whatever. We fix it, and it's so frustrating when you can't fix your own family. And I could see a lot of problems. And I'm like. Give you a non-medical example, the sort of growing clutter and hoarding that was going on with mum and dad, and you don't notice it while it's happening. And I don't know, hoarding is a real problem for some people. I don't honestly know whether that was sort of innate in my family or whether it was a byproduct of the care situation and the deteriorating health. But it got to the point where the house was hazardous and really difficult to deal with. And one of the most challenging moments I ever faced was wondering whether I should actually raise a safeguarding concern on my own mother. As paramedic versus son, which am I going to be in this situation? It never actually came to that, but it was getting close.
And how did that resolve? Was it getting the care in place that helped to declutter and clean up, or were there other things?
Eventually. I think that just became really important. I mean, I would surreptitiously get rid of stuff when I got away with it on my visits, but actually, and there's an interesting point here in a number of aspects of care. But later on, once we got carers and somebody, friend operating as a cleaner doing the clearing up, Dad would go, "This is nice, isn't it?" Which leads me on to another point, actually, which I kind of really wanted to make, and I've seen it with my own dad, but also with friends who have gone through this situation of having to get care for somebody in the home or potentially having to get somebody into a care facility full time. You go through a really hard time with your loved one because they don't want it. They protest. It can get really difficult. They don't want this. Don't. What am I doing here? But what I've noticed is over time that can mellow into a gratitude. Actually, I'm being well looked after. I'm safe. I'm grateful, and I've seen it in. I can think of 3 examples easily off the top of my head, where gone over that really difficult hump in the relationship to a more settled. Oh, thank you for putting me here. This is quite nice. And that's amazing because you don't expect it when you're going through the protest stage. I think that also applies to getting a cluttered place cleaned up, as much as getting personal care or companionship care or whatever it is.
Well, that's great to hear, because hopefully that will encourage someone who's listening that is in that stage where they feel this is never going to change, I'm never going to persuade this person to have care, we're never going to sort this house out, that actually you felt like that at different points, but yet you did overcome it. There were ways forward with it.
I saw it in action the other day. I still do a little bit of responding for the ambulance service, and went to a lady who'd fallen, and the family explained the situation to me of, lining up the care, but loved one was refusing, and I was able to say, look, you will get there. It's hard right now. It's going to be really tough, but the other side of the line, things will settle.
So can you tell us a bit about what was happening when you first realised that you might need to arrange some care for your family?
It's a long story, and I'll try and condense it a little bit, but just to give you a picture of the family. So as of most of our lives, there was mum, dad, I'm the eldest, and I've got 2 younger sisters. Youngest sister was diagnosed with quite a severe mental health problem in her late teens, which has continued to this day, although she's very well managed now. But I think over the decades that led to mum and dad's energies being totally concentrated on caring for her in the best way they knew how, which was difficult. Mental health care in the 1980s, 90s was in need of improvement. I think the answer to your question probably starts about 8 or 10 years ago, when I realised that mum and dad had pretty much just exhausted themselves doing this over the decades, and they kind of become hoarders. The house was getting cluttered. My mum had sort of retired to the chair to watch TV, really, and my dad was doing everything around the house. And my first inkling of care needs was around that time, and particularly when mum had a couple of falls and went into hospital. And she had a reablement package each time, 6 weeks of free care. And we thought, great, me and my other sister, something's happening. And as that 6 weeks finished, Dad didn't pay for it to roll on, which was so frustrating for us. Fast forward a couple of years, Mum passed away in 2018. That left Dad and my sister sort of caring for each other, and I hadn't realised at the time, it's obvious now, I hadn't realised that Dad was on his way to a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you can look back into the history and see the little signs growing over the years. Fortunately, they moved from the big cluttered house to a smaller bungalow while Dad still had the mental capacity to do that. And so they still made a mess of the little bungalow, and it was still very frustrating for me and my other sister. And I suppose the sense of care needs started most with, we just want to get a cleaner in. We just want to get somebody to tidy the place up and keep it safe and hygienic. No, we're not having anybody coming into the house. And this sort of rolled on until the pandemic, when things started to change, I think, and we got an opportunity, which I'll talk about some more. The answer to your question, I suppose, is a growing realisation over a 7 or 8 year period. But the frustration of not being able to put anything in place yet.
And that's often the way, isn't it? You start to notice the little signs, and even if you're being really proactive and thinking, right, let's try and get something in place, the person themselves might still feel, they're very independent, they don't want a carer, they can manage themselves. So it's a challenge that we face all of the time, actually, when people contact us about their families, and that reluctance to receive that care and support from the individual who, maybe everyone else can see they need it, but it's a hard thing to accept, and we're probably going to be like that ourselves in the future.
It's quite possible, isn't it? I mean, I hope not. But you try to learn from what's gone on. I should add that I was living about, and still do live, about 200 miles away. My other sister was about an hour's drive away, so it was all remote. There was never never any reluctance from us to try and get care in place. The reluctance was all from my parents, whose refusal, I suppose, spread to my youngest sister as well. She took on a lot of their characteristics with her condition, and no, we don't need anybody. There was a time when we arranged occupational therapy for her. No, it didn't happen. So yeah. There's a big psychological barrier. I think sometimes, for us, the psychological barrier was with our parents. For some people, the psychological barrier, I think, is in yourself, and getting to that stage where you admit that you do need help. We knew we needed help.
Yeah. And what was it in the end that enabled you to get care involved, and how did you find the right people to do that?
Yeah, that was interesting. We were getting a bit desperate over this cleanliness and hygiene situation. It was exacerbated by the pandemic, because obviously there was a long period of time when I won't say we couldn't visit, because you could visit for care purposes, and my other sister, who was only an hour away, would do regular shopping trips and cleaning trips. We had a great link worker with Alzheimer's UK. And we were chatting away, and we were trying all sorts of tricks in our heads. We were thinking, should we get someone in who tell Dad they're just a friend helping out, that kind of thing. Our Alzheimer's worker said to us, actually, why don't you have a look at the CQC ratings and see who gets the best ratings? And I think it was quite a hint, really, that she kind of knew an organisation that would understand our needs, but obviously couldn't say that because you can't show favouritism. And I'd never thought of that. And actually, two things happened at once. We did end up with an informal arrangement with a neighbour that still exists, but at the same time, we approached Unique Senior Care. My sister and I had a Zoom call, which was great, actually. It was with Katie, the manager at the time, and Phil, one of the directors, and that conversation has stayed with me, because it was great to be talking to the folk that led the company, and it was great to see that their motivation had been actually to get better care for people that they loved and cared about, and so that first meeting had a lot, really, that resonated and made us think, maybe all is not lost.
Did it have an impact, kind of living so far away? Are there any tips that you might be able to share with our listeners about if they are trying to arrange things remotely, what kind of things could they do?
Get a reliable car, because we spend a lot of time on the motorway, and you've got to manage that with yourself and your job and your other challenges in life. My other sister, obviously she's got a family, we've got a family, and one or two care needs that I haven't even mentioned around our own families. I think that it's communicating and reaching out. I mean, there's all sorts of technical things you can do. So a friend of mine whose dad passed away from dementia a few years ago, she had cameras in the house and tracked him all the time. He was a wanderer. Thankfully, my dad wasn't a wanderer. With his Alzheimer's, he became more and more settled in the house. Thank goodness, during COVID, he would have been everywhere. He didn't understand COVID at all. And I must share with you a couple of funny moments about what happened when the care first came in. But no, it is difficult from distance. I know I have a number of friends who are in the same situation. I think it goes with being the generation that we are. But just go back to that first meeting. I think the thing that I came away with there was the sense of this organisation having an understanding of how to get care over the line for people who say they don't need it but actually really do need it. Yeah, and I thought, yeah, there's some amazing sort of psychology in there. My sister and I came away from that. It was only a Zoom meeting. That's what we did, but came away with the sense, oh, somebody gets this, and also gets this, right through to the end game. We once your loved one's got Alzheimer's, dementia, terminal cancer, whatever it is, we all know the outcome. We're trying to postpone it for as long as possible and make their lives as happy as possible for as long as possible. But there was no reluctance to talk about what happens at the end and the end of life care situation. But I really I've said it before that to understand how to work with those psychological barriers to care and get somebody to accept care when they're really saying they don't want it. That's a real challenge and a real skill.
And I guess if you are far away, if you found that very local provider that you feel you can trust and that you've built a relationship with, that takes some of the strain off and some of the worry of being, hours away.
Totally.
If something happens.
Totally. Once we were over the line and a carer was coming in, it was 3 times a week, we knew that if anything was going horribly wrong, we would know about it. That we knew that we'd get regular reports on what was going on. And so, I suppose the answer to your question about if you're far away, the communication aspect, whichever company, carer, arrangement you come up with, good communication is absolutely essential. And I've been very happy with the communication. I know if something is changing in the home situation, and I know that there's a good response to the things I ask about, because I think I've got a pretty good understanding. Dad's no longer with us, but my sister has ongoing needs, and it's another thing to mention actually, that there was kind of a seamless transfer of care once Dad was gone, which has been great. But yeah, just being so far away, being able to catch up on things by phone, by email, by report, is the communication.
So you mentioned that CQC reports were really important, and that initial conversation that you had with the team and how that made you feel. Was there anything else that you considered when you were choosing a provider, or were those the two main things?
We didn't really look anywhere else in the end, because we were very impressed with that first conversation. I think we thought, let's give it a try. And I don't know what I said to my dad to get that first introduction to happen, but every individual's different, aren't they? Everybody's got their own sense of humour, their own quirks, personalities. I don't know how it happened, and I'm sure Katie won't mind me mentioning this by name, but she walked in the pandemic. My dad's got a quirky, naughty sense of humour. And she walked in with a face mask on. I said before, he didn't understand the pandemic, so he looked up at her and said, "Why are you wearing a muzzle?" And she said, "Because I bite." And that is Dad's sense of humour. And, she won him over in that moment. And from then on, we were allowed to have somebody in the house. And I say it like that because that's how Dad saw it. Who's that woman coming in then? Who's that person coming in? And the next thing, I guess, that won us over was understanding how the whole companionship, friendship, relationship thing works, because it was one thing to allow somebody in the house, but to allow somebody to, touch his body or get him in the shower, or deal with personal hygiene. Oh, no, he wasn't having that. And that took months. That took great patience and persistence on behalf of the carers to win his confidence, and even towards the end it was a bit of a struggle, but we got there.
So it was important that it was the same carers that were coming to see your dad and building that relationship with him, because probably otherwise they wouldn't have got to that stage.
Absolutely, the consistency. And interestingly, when he was finally put on end of life care, we had some additional funded care. He needed the personal stuff doing 4 times a day. And this is why I think it's so important to get advice, to read the CQC reports if you can, or get somebody to help you with them if they can't. Because the other company, and I can't even remember the name actually, it was kind of on the cheap. It was mostly lads from overseas who were well-meaning, but care wasn't their chosen career. They'd taken a job in care as a means of remaining in the UK. One of them was brilliant. I invited him to Dad's funeral. He had real leadership skills. He kind of chivied the others along. But I found myself educating some of them about some of the hygiene issues, and I thought, this isn't right. But it was paid for and it was necessary at the time. Contrasting with what I've seen with the sort of training and development the unique senior care carers have, and I think there's a huge gap, I guess, between the organisations that are really focused on understanding individual needs and meeting them, and those that are sort of running on a shoestring, I suppose, which is hard because we were fortunate that we could afford a better standard of care. A lot of people can't.
Yeah. And also fortunate, I guess, that you had that background to know how to do things correctly, which not everyone would.
No.
If a carer did arrive and they weren't doing things, infection control, if they weren't carrying out the correct processes, some people might not know how to guide and advise them.
Yeah. No, it was. A simple thing. Well-meaning but misguided. I walked into the house once just as they changed my dad, and one of these new guys came up to me with his gloves on and shook my hand. And like, don't do that. You've just been changing somebody. But obviously the infection control needed a bit of work. So no discredit to those guys who were doing the care. They were doing the best with the training they've had. But it's important to understand if you love and care about somebody, if you've got to the stage where you admitted you need help and they need help, you want the best help you can get.
Caring for someone you love is one of the most important things you'll ever do, but it's not always easy. At Unique Senior Care, we're here whenever you need support. Whether it's a bit of advice, short-term respite, or ongoing care, we've been supporting families for over 15 years, and you can lean on us too. Call 0808 134 1164 to speak to a care expert or visit uniquecare.co.uk.
So in those days when you had the other provider in, naturally there were some worries about the quality of care that's being provided. What do you think are the common worries that most family members have when their loved ones are receiving care?
I think, and this is not just from my own experience, but from chatting to friends, colleagues, there's two sets of worries. There's psychological worries and the practical worries. The psychological worries are your own. If you've been doing the care yourself and you're finding you need to let go, that worry that I think people often feel that they're letting their loved one down by paying for care and not doing it themselves. And it takes a while to realise that actually the reverse is true. If you pay for care and give yourself a break, you're actually probably better off at being, the son or the daughter or the cousin or whatever relationship you are to support the care that's happening. So there's the psychological side, but there's also the practical side. What happens? What happens if Dad doesn't like them? What happens if he gets angry? Obviously, various forms of dementia can take so many manifestations. People can change character. People can behave in unusual ways. I can chat a bit about that in a minute if you like. But there's those kind of worries, but also the worries that I suppose thinking about personal care. Somebody you don't know is going to undress your loved one and clean them up in the most intimate places, and that's kind of hard to accept when you start thinking about it.
So it's interesting that you say that actually a lot of the worries are not the practical ones. They're more to do with the how you feel, maybe some feelings of guilt, or that if you have been doing something for a family member, having to let that go. But as you said, the benefits of that were that you could become a son again.
Yeah.
You could
Yes.
have that role rather than being a carer. And quite often what we find is that individuals actually prefer that. They prefer to have someone who's outside of their family to come in and care for them, because actually they don't want their son or their daughter doing that for them. It's very individual. Some families, some people prefer that, but often that's what we see.
Well, yeah, we definitely prefer that. I saw parts of my dad I never wanted to see, and I'm sure that's a common experience. My wife went through it with her mother as well, and it's really hard. It's like a role reversal from when you were the child and you had everything done for you, and often with older people, as their cognitive abilities reduce, they become quite childlike. And that's another challenge because they don't like being told what to do. None of us do, really, do we? So dealing with that issue, I think sometimes that's easier with an external person with the right communication skills and attitude. You've got a better chance of collaboration and cooperation than if you're a son or a daughter that says, "Dad, stop doing that," or "Mum, you need to clean yourself up better," or whatever it is. Well, don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, because there's always going to be that family dynamic.
Yeah.
Between you, that however hard you try,
Yeah.
it's there. And, we all have that, don't we? So, was there anything that you talked about? Character changing and worries about your dad getting angry. Were there any particular challenges that you faced as the care was happening?
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds very strange to say, but we were kind of in some ways fortunate or blessed that the way Dad's Alzheimer's progressed, he mellowed. He became almost more content in himself. As a younger man, he would get very cross if things didn't go his way, and he was, he could have some difficult moods. Nothing violent or aggressive or anything like that. Just the challenges, but he just became kind of grateful for everything that was happening for him. But the biggest challenge was he also became naughtier. The filters often go, don't they, with Alzheimer's or different forms of dementia. And Dad always had a bit of a lot of a mischievous, naughty sense of humour, but it didn't have the brakes on it, and so he would regularly ask the carers, and when he was in hospital, the nurses, "Will you marry me? You're going to get into bed with me?" All that kind of stuff. Now, total respect for how the carers and the hospital nurses dealt with that kind of thing. The only time we got worried was when he started trying to touch more often, because carers shouldn't have to put up with that in the workplace. And he would try and touch a bottom or a breast or something like that, and we would tell him, "Dad, no, that's out of line." But I will say the carers were fantastic in understanding that this was a product of his Alzheimer's and not a deliberate act of sexual misdemeanor or whatever you want to call it. That's a really hard situation, and thankfully Dad was never too full on with it. Everything he said with a smile on his face, and the carers and the hospital staff kind of understood that sense of humour and went with it. But I'm well aware that for other people the challenges are much greater. People can become very angry. People can become occasionally violent. And then I mentioned the walkabout thing. My colleague whose dad had to be tracked all the time because he'd just go wandering off and not find his way home. These things are really, really hard.
And hard, when we know that's not the character of our loved one. That's not how they would have acted. Yeah. So really important for you, by the sounds of it, that the carers understood and they didn't judge. They accepted it as part of the way the dementia was affecting his life, and they were able to adapt around it and find some really good ways of supporting it whilst managing that balance of keeping themselves safe and not encouraging the behaviour, but finding positive ways to support and manage.
Yeah, it's a real skill, a fantastic skill. This experience of the last few years has opened my eyes really to what a skilled job a carer is, totally undervalued in our society. It needs to change.
The Unique Senior Care Advice Hub is a free online resource to help you make sense of care. It's full of expert advice, practical guides on things like dementia and funding, and real stories from families who've been in your shoes. Visit uniquecare.co.uk/care advice hub to feel more confident about what comes next.
So you've talked about the communication being very, very good between yourself and the management team, the office team. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about how involved you were and what kind of ways the team maybe asked you to be involved and participate in the care that your family were being provided?
Yeah, I mean, kind of fast forward to the present, I am regularly invited to do reviews for the current care for my sister and get involved with that. I know there's always somebody available on the end of a phone, which is very reassuring when you're 200 miles away. And one of the biggest, my sister's condition is very stable with the medication that she's on, but if somebody else will do something for her, she will let them. And what we've been trying to do over the last few years is encourage a level of independence that she hasn't had for most of her adult life. She's doing okay, but I really have been listened to when I've said, when the carer goes in, don't do this for her, get her to do it for herself. Whether it's the vacuuming or whether it's cleaning her fingernails or cooking a simple meal or whatever, it's enablement we're after, and I feel like I'm setting out a challenge in a way, because we're almost kind of into occupational therapy territory for some of those skills. But when I'm in town, I've met one or two of the carers, and they're doing their best with it. They're responding. Simple things like how to use a mobile phone or a calculator for what you've done with your shopping. Those are all things that, given the situation, my sister probably would have done many years ago. Not the mobile phone, because we didn't have them, but we're just picking up on it again now, and it's little sort of inching forward with progress. But I really do feel like I've been listened to on that front.
That's brilliant. And is there anything in particular that you've seen your sister be able to do that's maybe surprised you, or wow, that's the first time she's ever done that, or done that for many, many years?
There's a few things. It's just seeing a little bit of independent thinking, just clearing a few things away without having to be prompted, and sometimes it's a lot of the time it only kind of happens when the carer is present, to be fair. But I think I feel like we're part of the same team in a way, even though I'm a brother and the carers are obviously paid carers. We're trying to achieve the same thing, which is happiness and a sense of independence, and I think she's got those at the moment. So yeah, just those. It's a particular situation with a particular set of health conditions and a particular history that has meant she's now an older adult, but has never done all these things independently. We're kind of supporting her to have as much independence as is feasible in the situation. And I think, between the carers and ourselves and the neighbour who does some informal care, there's good communication, good teamwork. GP practice as well. We are blessed with a very good GP practice, a regular communication with the practice nurse. And that's not always the case, is it?
No. So that's really an interesting insight, that actually often when we think about care, we think about the person needing more and more help and support and people doing more and more for them as they deteriorate. But actually great care is about someone's goals and outcomes, and that might mean that over time that they actually do more and more for themselves, and that the carer promotes that independence. And it sounds like your sister has been a really good example of that happening.
Yeah, I think so. And it's an interesting contrast with Dad, and a different situation with Dad, because with his Alzheimer's, he actually wanted to do less and less. Encouraging him to do things for himself was an uphill battle. And I'm sure that'll be the case for many older adults, that life has left them tired, and sitting watching TV is their choice.
It's very common with dementia or other conditions to lose that motivation, and to everything feels like an effort, because maybe physically there are things going on, and it is hard and challenging to do things yourself, but that independence is so key. During the time that your family have received care, has anything gone wrong? And if so, how was that handled?
Not really. The nearest that we came to it, I think, was those incidents where Dad was starting to grab and touch a bit too much. I, as best I could, made it clear to my dad and also to the carers and the management team that we know that's not acceptable, even though it's going through, it's coming from the place of the Alzheimer's, that his filters have gone, and something he would never have done that 20 years ago. But I can see how that has the potential to go very wrong if an older person just gets too intrusive. At the end of the day, working in care, working in healthcare, you have to look after yourself in order to be able to look after the patient. And if any of the carers had felt uncomfortable going into Dad, I would have said, "Well, don't go. Let's rethink this." It didn't get that far, but that was the closest it got to something going wrong. I think there's always obviously the little day-to-day things. I understand if a carer's got a busy schedule and they turn up at a client and they're on the floor and they've got to wait for an ambulance, that's going to throw the whole schedule out for the day. It's kind of, that goes with the territory, really, doesn't it? And I've always had good communication in those situations. So-and-so's going to be delayed by a couple of hours. Is this okay? And that reassures you, really. I know it's going to happen, obviously, from my professional background. But yeah, in terms of something big going wrong, that was the nearest.
And what about the matches with the carers? Did they all work out? Or were they some that were maybe weren't the right person for your dad or your sister?
The ones for Dad, I think, were spot on. Actually, they just they just seemed to get his mad sense of humour, and it wasn't always a naughty sense of humour. Sometimes it was just a bit off the wall. He had his favourite words for thing. A bottom was a trumpy, and somebody he thought was a bit of a fool was a Charlie. And this is just part of our family history. And if my other sister ever listens to this, she'll just laugh and say, "Oh yeah," and we've got more words than that as well. So no, I think with Dad they were spot on. For my sister, they've been fantastic. There's been one or two. Actually, there was one, I think, where the office had a few concerns that she wasn't entirely meeting the match or pulling her weight, and asked me for an opinion, and I gave an honest opinion, which she wasn't a bad carer, she just wasn't as good as I'd got used to. I think she's long since left. But so that was that's quite difficult in a way, I guess. When you see a carer in action with somebody you care about and you think it's insufficient and you're paying for it, what do you do? Do you challenge the individual? Do you go to the office? It depends on, I'm quite a diplomatic person. I want things to improve. I don't see any point in getting cross, really, but I can see how some people would get really quite cross and frustrated, and in every sector of work there's always going to be some people who are better than others.
And sometimes it's just about the personalities and who gels with who, doesn't it? Because you might get one carer that is fantastic with somebody else's mother, sister, aunt, but actually when they meet your relative, they're just not quite the right match, not quite the right personality type. Maybe there's someone who doesn't have that banter that you're looking for. So it's important to feel that you can say, actually, they're great, but maybe not quite right, and have that open communication where you can go back, or if there is a concern or something that's not as good as it should be, knowing that the office will listen to you, knowing that they will take action and solve the problem. I
think it probably was said to me at the time, but if I was going through this again, that's what I'd want to hear up front. Please tell us if it's not working. Please tell us if there's any issues. We'll work to improve it. That sort of openness from the start.
Yeah. And you said earlier, hindsight is a wonderful thing. Is there anything else in hindsight that you think, I wish I'd known that at the start, or I wish someone had said that to me or shared that with me?
I think the advice of our Alzheimer's work to look for good professional care. Yeah, in spite of the fact that I am a healthcare professional, it didn't register as early as I'd have liked it to. Really, I mean, again, perhaps with hindsight, it was all very timely because everything came together well in the end. But we went through that long period of frustration of not knowing what to do. So, yeah, I suppose calling for help earlier, seeking expertise earlier in the situation, and recognising the impact it was having on ourselves, me and my other sister. My job was getting really busy about the same time all this was happening. And, I don't mind admitting I fell apart for a while. I had to take some time off. I took a period. Work were fantastic. I asked for extended leave. I got extended leave. I let a lot of projects go, and just spent some time sorting myself out so that I could get back on my feet and be a better family member and hopefully better at my job as well. And that's a really hard thing to admit. I think other people saw things getting on top of me before I did. We had a situation with my mother-in-law's care that was going on at the same time. So my wife was preoccupied on that side. I was preoccupied on my dad and sister's side, and it just got really heavy. So it's that earlier recognition, honesty with yourself that you're not coping as well as you think you are.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us, Gary, because I think people might have been looking at you and listening to this and thinking, he's got a background in healthcare, he's got it all together, it all went smoothly. So actually, it makes us realise it is an overwhelming situation. If you've got a responsible job and you've maybe got your own family and you've got your older relative, or we've all got our limits, haven't we?
Yeah.
And there's a point at which we need to stop and have that time to just concentrate on our own well-being, so that, as you said earlier again, so that we can then be the best family member. We can be the best at what we're doing because we've managed to refill our resources.
It's interesting, isn't it? That's something I would have readily said to someone else. It took a long time to accept it myself. And at the time, mother-in-law came out of hospital with complex needs. And for me, it was like, I imagine myself like a pickup truck going down the road, and you put one too many heavy loads on the back and the wheels came off. That's just how I felt for a while. I wasn't depressed or anything like that. I was just not coping. It was just too much stuff. And I had some great help, and had to admit I needed it.
That's really good. What would be the one thing that you'd say to someone who's at that point right now? They're feeling overwhelmed and they're just trying to juggle so many different balls or spin so many different plates in their life. What would be your advice to them?
I think it's really hard sometimes to realise that the best help you can get is often independent of your family and friends. Seeking professional help, whether that's through your workplace, whether it's through a charity, whether it's through your contacts, and then the right professional help. I chatted to a counsellor for quite some time, all done online, and it was like somebody holding a mirror up to yourself and understanding yourself better. It was interesting. It wasn't quite like I expected. I said she was a bit like physiotherapy for the mind. She kept giving me homework, and I had to work on a few things to change my attitude to a few things. But to answer your question, I think hopefully we'll chat to our friends. Most of us have got contacts, friends, family members we can talk to. But when it becomes overwhelming, if you go to the pub with a friend, you're going to overwhelm them, and the friendship changes. If you might actually need somebody with a bit of professional expertise to say, "Have you thought about this, Gary? Why do you think like that? where does that come from in your own life and your own pace? And it's a bit like having a bit of a refit, a reboot of a computer, or something, putting some new software in, or think about things in different ways. It probably, if I went into detail, it's probably another whole podcast in itself. But to reach, and I'm not decrying the value of friends. We all absolutely need the support of friends and family. And if you've got great support from friends and family, you may not need professional help, but sometimes, once in a while, you might. And there's no need for any stigma attached to it. Doesn't mean you're going mad. It just means you're a human being that needs a bit of a support with being a human being.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening. I do hope that you found this episode useful. Do remember to check out our Care Advice Hub, where you can find lots of practical tips and support to navigate the care journey, whatever stage you're at. This has been the Care Podcast, brought to you by Joe Cleary and Unique Senior Care. We hope you'll join us for the next episode.